Hello there, people in Radio Land. We are live in Vertical. I'm Martin McKenna, and
I'm Neil Farrimond. Hello from Portugal.
And I am Jan Keck. I'm here in Germany.
and we're all in hexagons here. And I don't really like the hexagon format. We just sort of tried it as an experiment because we can. We've got some Zoom guests in the background who are sitting there. They'll bring them on a little bit later, but for the moment we're just going to swap a couple of scenes around a bit, because this hexagon effect is kind of, my head's in a point here, and I've almost, got a bit of cleavage going on down here or something. I don't know what it is, but not really a good look, although we can do it. So sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should. So let's change that scene, and we'll go to something a little better, where we are bringing in our very special guest, Jan. Now, it might get a little bit annoying if that were kept repeating all over the place. So I think what we're going to do is switch to a more sensible scene, but just as an eye catcher. I thought that one looked quite interesting. But we'll go to a more regular scene. So for those of you who don't know Jan, would you like to do a little introduction to yourself?
Sure. I recently started introducing myself as a recovering shy guy. And just today, before I came here, I actually was playing Super Mario Kart with my son. I don't know if anybody has played this before. I did not know that there's a character called Shy Guy, which is not what I'm referring to. I actually call myself a recovering shy guy because I used to be a very shy kid. When I was growing up, I probably would rarely raise my hand. So if you were in class with me, you wouldn't even have an idea that I was there. And for the last couple of years, I really made it my mission to make sure that other people like me don't feel left out when they're in a group, making sure that their voice matters, they get heard, even though they might not be the ones who are ready to raise their hand and unmute and speak in front of a large group. And a lot of my work has now been focused on helping groups be more connected, build more trust without cheesy icebreaker activities.
Very cool.
That sounds good to me.
I wish you were at my school.
I think I am the first person in the world to run out of or sneak out the back door when somebody has that icebreaker, which is go turn around to the person next to you and give them a hug. No, not really. Please. So I definitely disappear off the side door when that sort of thing happens. So we're looking forward to a little bit later on to chatting about a book that you have currently in production, and going through a couple of different engagement techniques. But the point of today really was to see whether we could, in this format, get a decent amount of space for a presentation that was engaging. So we're going to run through a couple of different things there. But perhaps first of all, we ought to explain what people are looking at and where it's all coming from. So for the geeks amongst you who want to know, I am running Ecamm Live, which is streaming software, in vertical, and that is going out to LinkedIn via Restream, and Restream is populating it everywhere else. So anybody who is watching at the moment on their phone, please go over to the YouTube channel that Neil has posted a link to and watch this on your phone on YouTube. Now the reason for that is at this moment in time, LinkedIn will not honour the vertical format when live. However, if you go back and watch this in the LinkedIn app after we've finished, it will magically turn into full screen video. So it will look really good on LinkedIn after we've finished. Today, if you're watching live, make sure you're either watching it on YouTube on your phone or you're watching on a large monitor, because otherwise we will feel a bit small. But it does mean that we've got a load of content that we can repurpose afterwards, post to LinkedIn, who are now promoting vertical video, and then link them to the replay. So that is kind of the purpose behind what we're doing today. So I'm kind of interested to know whether people are actually consuming vertical video or any of the content of LinkedIn on their phone or not. So I'm going to go to our next via a magical transition, which I'd forgotten about. And what I want you to do here is to answer the question whether you use a small screen to look at your content on, so i.e. are you looking at it on the mobile? That would be a 1. Are you looking at this regularly on a large screen? That would be a 5. If you're somewhere in between and use a little bit of mobile and a little bit on your phone, then I guess you're somewhere in the middle. So what you can now do is just type in the comments a 1 if you regularly use your mobile phone to consume LinkedIn, and a 5 if you're using it on a big screen, or a sort of 2, 3, 4 if the balance is more towards mobile or more towards the large screen. I'd be interested to know what people think on that. So you can type in any number into the comments and it's going to magically appear. And in fact, if I bring in a comment, I can actually say that Video Like a Dad has said 1.
Thank you, Daryl.
Stream Nation said 2. Leon's saying
I said 1
5.
too.
And Neil's saying 1. And these comments are coming in from all sorts of different platforms. So this is not just coming in the Zoom call. This is coming in from LinkedIn. It's coming in from YouTube. And you can see the little logos. So I can see that where Lion's coming in from. If I add to the broadcast, you'll see that I've got a different version on here. And here's Jan adding to the broadcast. And I should really put something in there as well. So too many buttons to press, guys. But it's interesting to note just how many people are watching on vertical. So let's add Johan adding in the Zoom call there as well. So we've immediately got interactions from all over the place in a relatively small space on the screen, but still looking pretty good. So I'm pleased that we're able to get something that looks so clear on the phone, and we've had a couple of comments saying it's looking really good. So let's bring that in. So Douglas is there. We'll add Douglas to the broadcast. And thank you, guys. So we can add the comments in very, very easily as well. And something just before we came on screen that Jan was mentioning was we're all quite small, so maybe we need to exaggerate hand movements and things like that. So thoughts on that, Jan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit bigger than both of you right now, which is nice. But when I'm thinking of how most people also share their slides on Zoom, if they don't use a tool like Ecamm or any other tool where they can show the slide next to them, usually we get just kind of banned into that top little corner, and we become so small that people can't really see you anymore. So I think if you have the capability to add some text, add some information on the screen, but still be visible to people, so they can pick up your facial expressions, your gestures, you'll connect a lot more with your audience. So yeah, I think this is definitely something worth playing around with it, because most of our cameras right now are horizontal, yet we're streaming in like a vertical format, right?
Yeah, so I think
definitely.
that's definitely part of the challenge is just thinking out of the box a little bit, and certainly if anybody's seen any of the previous sections in Vertical, we had multiple guests, and we were getting spotlighting the guest effectively by making their camera bigger and then everyone else's camera a bit smaller, and we would just go round in a sort of a carousel type affair to rotate the guests in and out, and that worked really well. But that was definitely a case of, oh, they're still perfectly visible as small tiles, but you want your main speaking guest to be bigger than everybody else. So there are multiple ways we can do that. So I did think that this would be a good experiment in terms of things like that. And we'll go on to, I think, another Streamer Live type section here, because we also wanted to check out whether or not words would appear large and readable on the screen. So in 1 or 2 words, if you're watching this on any platform, you can do this now on YouTube, on Zoom, on LinkedIn, doesn't matter. I just want to type in any tools or techniques you use in 1 or 2 words for engagement.
It is worth noting, sorry, that on Zoom, we're not connected. It's only on the platforms that we're actually streaming to, which is LinkedIn, YouTube, and all 4 channels in our case. So that's why the YouTube is only working and LinkedIn at the moment, but everything else will be fine. So it's just that we don't connect to Zoom in the configuration that we've got, because we're using the Restream plugin for Streamer Live. So everything that's coming into Restream will be shown in the Streamer Live workplace. But anyway, we've got a few people already telling us, wow, keeping it simple, calls to action.
The YouTube app.
Nice.
I take it YT app is YouTube app.
Yeah, I think it must be, yeah. That's right.
Okay, so a lot of people using chat as the major way to engage people, and of course by using something like Streamer Live, then we can get these nice representations that drive graphs and bar charts and word clouds and all sorts of other sort of visualizations of the data coming in, whether that is numeric data or whether that is individual words or indeed sentences. So there's some fancy looking animations that we can have for sentences, and Streamer Live are continually looking at this square format specifically for use really with Vertical. So all of the visualizations that they have got can be in normal landscape, or you can choose to run them in this square format, which is a lot better suited for this sort of vertical engagement. So it's clear that, I'm sure if anyone is looking at this on their phone at the moment, then they're going to be able to see all of those words very, very clearly. People watch soccer on their phone. They read endless memos on their phone. So you can definitely see something like this on your phone. So let's just go back to Jan again. And this time we do get to talk about your book, because you have a book on melters and icebreakers. So tell us what the inspiration was for the book that you're holding on to, and what is in the content, and when is it going to be available to your wonderful public?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm usually not a big fan of icebreakers, and you see the name of the book is actually called Ice Melters, and this is because to me, I visualize when I hear the word breaking or icebreakers a person, the leader, walking into a room where everybody's frozen in place. Like all the participants are stuck, they can't move, and they come in with a big sledgehammer and they try to just whack on the ice to try to free people, while it also could hurt them. It is a very violent image, like just imagining breaking the ice. So to me, melting the ice is something that happens gradually. It's also not something that happens quickly, because building trust, building connections, it just takes time. It's not something that we can expect will just exist in a group that has never met before by doing one silly little game at the beginning. And to melt the ice, that's also the reason why I have a campfire behind me. We have to build a campfire, and I created this methodology that basically helps me remember whenever I'm designing any experience, if that's a meeting, a workshop, a training, my son's birthday party, like anything, it is, I always need to remember that I can't throw in something that is too risky for people right at the beginning. And if I remember the people who might be a little bit more quiet, a little bit more introverted, a little bit more shy, how can I make sure that I only gradually increase this risk, so by the end we all are at the same level where we can have deep, vulnerable conversations with each other? Because to me, that's the part that really links people together. It's kind of like the glue in a group. But if we try to get there too fast, or maybe even worse, do a activity, a fun game that in our heads is fun, but is actually not even related to the reason why people are here, then we're also going to get a lot of resistance. And it's that reason why I think when we use traditional icebreakers, they often do the exact opposite of what we intend them to do. Like, they don't help people build trust and connect. Sometimes it actually makes them more competitive instead. So yeah, the book is basically my tips and strategies on and ideas for activities and things you can do, from the invitation when you send it out to your participants for your experience, for your gathering, for your meeting, to the moment where you want to have those difficult or vulnerable conversations in the room, where every voice gets heard and matters. And most of the things that I talk about are not the activities, not the games.
And I think
I was just going to ask you, sorry, is there one thing you would say then that's a technique that's helped you get over your shyness and help sort of have these ice melters in your conversation? If you were to pick one thing that was pivotal in your path to becoming the presenter that you are today, what would that be?
The interesting thing is that on one hand, the person who's leading the meeting, like, they have a lot of power in making sure people feel included and they feel welcome. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on in my book. But also there's a lot of things that each individual can do if they see a reason why they might want to get over their shyness, or just get out of their shell a little bit more. And I want to say, for me, there were two things that really, really helped me with that. Number one is I was always part of different communities. If that was like a politics, if that was a sports club, if that was a summer camp, there was always a time where I was part of a community and I could watch what other leaders were doing and very quickly notice what worked really well in getting me included and what didn't work at all. So I think just by paying attention in groups, there's a lot there to learn. And the other thing I have to say is taking improv classes.
Right.
I discovered improv probably about 10 years ago, and it really has become a bit of a life philosophy for anybody who's never heard of improv. Like, it to me, it's actually not just improv comedy, like trying to be funny and kind of think on your feet, but being more comfortable with the unexpected and being in situations where you can't control everything, yet everybody's working together towards a similar goal. And a lot of the things I've learned from improv classes applies to anything else that I've been doing in my life.
so. You'll be in Edinburgh anytime soon, I think, at the festival, presumably, of comedy, and we look forward to that. I
Would
also
love
think
to.
I read that in terms of groups, that one of the things that you did was assign roles to the groups to maybe have people making notes and then giving feedback, so they actually had a job to do. Can you explain some of those roles that you assign a little bit more?
Yeah, there's one concept that is called challenge by choice, which I try to apply as much as I can. And basically means that if you give your participants maybe 2 or 3 choices over how they engage, if they actually choose one of them, they're more likely to feel ownership over that role, over that choice, and then they're more engaged in that. And like one specific example is when I'm running my workshops and trainings on Zoom, I always say, I've posed the question, and then I say, if you want to write in the chat, write in the chat. If you want to unmute, raise your hand. And then I make sure that I read out some chat messages, and we'll also hear from a few people that wanted to unmute. And that way people can choose whatever they feel more comfortable with. And in like if it was more of a icebreaker type activity that requires a few people to step outside of their comfort zone, maybe a lot, I like to, again, give people the choice. Number one is I'm looking for volunteers who are the ones who engage the most, who also learn the most. I really try to make a case that people should volunteer, and I never had a problem of finding at least a handful of people. But then I'm also giving the option, hey, I'm also looking for a few more observers. And observers are not participating in the activity, but your job will be to pay attention to anything that happens, pay attention to what people say, what they do. And at the end, I will check in with you and get your viewpoint, because I only have 2 eyes, 2 ears. I can only pay attention to so much. But when we do an activity with a group, there's a lot of things that happen really quickly. So those roles are actually really important for the group learning. And by giving people the choice over, hey, I want to be a volunteer, I want to be an observer, or maybe I just want to stand back and just observe everything. Like, in a way, everybody's an observer, right? But I specifically asked for a few people to take that like little step to the front, and a few people take that large step to actually come in the middle and volunteer.
Yeah, and I think that's important. You know, I've done a lot of these courses where they do Belbin analysis on people's character and things like that, and all I can tell you is I'm definitely not a finisher completer. I'm terrible at finishing off jobs that I've started, but definitely, you know, different people like to have different roles, and I can certainly see across a group or team that's a great way of making sure that you capture everybody, not just the ones who like to be front and centre, because, you know, there are people who will take over in that scenario. So if you can spread the love, so to speak, then I think that sounds like a great way of doing things. Is the book actually completed? I know we asked you off camera beforehand, but you need to tell everyone else now.
So on December 31st last year, so just about a month and a half ago, I finished my first draft of like the completed book. I've been writing about a year and a half, mostly sending out an email every Monday, because I said in the beginning, I'm very bad at staying committed to sitting down and write, because I feel like there's other things that I would like to do with my time. So I really need some accountability. And I've been able to find a group of people on my email list that will give me feedback every time I send something out. So that has been a great process for me, but also for them, because they get to see some of the content before the book even exists, give me feedback, and very often the feedback actually influences how I'm writing the chapters. So even with this first version, I have been, I think, getting about 38 or 39 people who've given me very detailed feedback that I now need to implement and write like the second draft, send it out again, and hopefully that will be like 2 more rounds of revisions before the content is done, and I can get into all of the other fun things of publishing a book, like illustration, the layout, the proofreading, and uploading all of the documents and formatting them in the right way. Like those are things that are literally blocked out of my mind because I was very distracted by that in the beginning, and I just needed to actually finish the content. So now that I'm nearing the end of the content writing, I can kind of look ahead to, okay, what is necessary to put the book actually into people's hands, And then the next thing that I'm also starting to plan is the whole marketing of it. Like, how do I make sure that people find out about the book?
Yeah,
Good plan.
and how are you going to do that, or don't you know yet?
I have a lot of ideas, but most likely it'll be doing things like what we're doing right now, getting on different podcasts or interview shows, so I can talk a bit more about it. And I'll be hosting a lot more events myself as well. Like, I have this vision of doing a in-person book tour to launch it, because right now I live in Germany, but I lived in Toronto in Canada for 14 years. So I definitely would want to host a little event in both those places. And who knows, if I can get a flight that stops in a couple of other big cities, that would be my dream, to do a little book tour, run some workshops where people can experience some of the content of the book as well.
That
That'd be a
sounds
great
to me
idea, I
like
think.
that sounds like Germany, Edinburgh, Iceland, and then over to Canada. That's that's the way to go, isn't it? That's the way the Vikings went.
That's the route.
Yeah, I'll have to go to Newfoundland, where they landed in Canada.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we ought to address the elephant in the room here, and that is your campfire for melting, ice breaking, ice melting, whatever. Everybody must ask you about this. I don't know whether you now think it's the best idea you've ever had or the worst idea you've ever had, because everybody must ask, what is the campfire that's going on behind you? So you're going to have to fill us in, like you will if you go on lots of other shows, and tell everybody where that came from, what the idea was, how you developed it, and what's going on there.
Yeah, so in Toronto, I used to host this event called Campfire Conversations, which was a way for adults to make more meaningful friendships, especially if you didn't know anyone and just moved to the city. And I would host this event once a month. And in the summer, I actually rented a real fire pit. There was a fire pit in a park in Dufferin Grove Park that you could rent. And I would host a gathering around, like, we would sit around it, we would do different activities, have different conversation starters. And at the end, people feel way more connected because they got to share something vulnerable with a stranger. And when winter came, which in Canada, winter gets quite cold, I wanted to continue the events, but not be outside in the campfire in the park. So I found this beautiful meditation studio that I fell in love with once I found out that they have a room in the back that is basically pitch black, and it just has star LEDs shimmering in the ceiling. And I thought, wow, this would be so cool if I could bring a campfire in there. And that's what I created my first campfire for. It was just this LED light bulb that has this flickering fire effect with a couple of sticks in a teepee around it. And I just set that up in that room, and it was magical. I brought my speaker, put some fire crackling sounds. If I was allowed to burn some incense or bring candles, I also had a campfire candle, but in that room it wasn't allowed, so I couldn't add that sense to it. But even without it, it just created this beautiful atmosphere where people were basically feeling like we're outside of the city, yet we were like right downtown. And when COVID hit, that campfire got a little bit bigger. It got upgraded, it turned into the back of my little studio. And then I brought it to conferences. I now have 4 campfires that I've built that I can set up as a whole, like, larger campfire campfire lounge that allows people to not do small talk. And it's been, really popular. And I guess the last thing that I can share about the campfire that is the thing that always tricks people up. Yes, it's real, because I need to go back with my chair to show you. I can actually move it, but those sparks are all added with the Ecamm Live magic, and only added in afterwards. I wish I could create sparks like this flying in my actual room. If that was possible, I would do it.
That looks really cool, though, because it's totally convincing that the sparks are coming from the actual campfire. which I think is really a clever way of overlaying different bits and pieces on Ecamm. And I have seen, I think, a couple of photographs of you in conferences with multiple campfires around as well. I know something that I've tried to do in the past is when I had a sort of a Christmas green screen thing going on with a fire in the background. And what I did was get one of these LED wands that had got a flickering flame effect and just put it on the desk beside me so that it sort of flickered off my face to, show a bit of glow on there. So I'm going to guess you've already done that.
Like that.
my Christmas decorations and bring in some snow. There we go.
Christmas decorations going on everywhere. We have to bring Johan in a second because he's got the whole Christmas vibe going on, and I'm all for Christmas vibes at this time of year anyway. I mean, just keep it going. Looks good. It's cold,
wrong
right?
Wrong scene. so
very cool.
If anybody like a video like a Doug, I've just read, which is video like a dad, but then I was going to say Doug because we got a couple of people watching. If you want to join us on Zoom, then the link for Zoom is posted in the comments, and you're welcome to be on camera with us. But what I'm going to do now is just transition through another scene, and we're going to have a look at whether or not we can run a presentation in this format. So, what I've got directly below me now is actually a keynote presentation. But if you look closely, you'll notice there's something a bit weird about the keynote presentation, and that is that it's square. Okay, so not many people know this, I suspect, but in Keynote, if you just press on the document button, you can choose custom and then make your keynote slide any size or shape that you want it to be. So you could make it fully vertical, you could make it 1080 by 1080, which is what I have done here, or you could make it somewhere in between to cover part of the scene. And when I play my my square keynote, it's going to behave just in the same way as every other keynote slide. So I can now, with my little clicker, presuming I've got onto that slide, I can just flick through my keynote slides, and they can be actually quite detailed. I can get quite a bit of text onto the slide at once, and it still looks pretty good. And if I go to something a little bit more clever, with this particular slide, I've started to build up some different things using Ecamm. So if you look very carefully just below me, the white band which is going across behind Neil and Jan and then below me actually is appearing on the slide deck here as well. So I'm starting to blend in an immersive way the background and the foreground, and the bottom of the scene as well, where it is blue and is blending in to the picture, is also a bit of a trick. So if I come over to my scene here and I show you what is actually on my deck, that's what my deck looks like. So my deck is actually green to blue, and I've colour picked the blue to match my background. If I then turn that off again, you can see that green screen key has blended in, and I've also got a picture in the background. So I turn the picture off and then bring the picture back on again. What I've done is I've used a blend mode of luminosity to give a sort of a black and white effect, but also bring out that white colour band on the actual deck. So as it turns out, in this mode, by using Ecamm as well, you can actually get quite clever and produce some things which are not easy to do at all if you were just doing a standard Zoom call with you as a tiny little picture in the corner of it. Well, you can do quite a lot more in this format. So we could have it like this, or we could even have it in such that I was actually presenting on green screen, standing up at the bottom of the scene. So that's just a little pre-recorded me on green screen, but I could be doing this as a live presentation with me on green screen and the presentation behind me. Or what else I could do is perhaps have myself and Neil and Jan as panelists, and then we'll bring on our guests who are sitting behind in the green room. So Johan can wave nicely in the green room. I've intentionally got Johan, who's joining us from Sweden, in black and white here at the bottom, just to emphasise that these are people who are just normally on your call, your Zoom call, watching, sitting in the gallery in the background. And myself and Neil and Jan would be the main people on that call looking at the deck. So let's go back to the deck again, and just to see what sort of presentation we could potentially be doing on the deck. So again, what I wanted to do was bring in some more sort of mountainous themed stuff going on with my deck here, and just to show you that although this is a tiny space, you can actually do quite a lot with it if you were holding, for instance, a leadership summit in Leith, which you wouldn't be doing, but you might be, and you wanted to bring in some bullet points, then there's enough room on here for me to be bringing in bullet points. And you know what, we've got quite a nice looking little presentation, albeit it's a small screen. I could definitely see that being quite engaging for all of the people who are watching and doing stuff like this. And I finish off my scene and I run out the presentation. So some of that is just clever usage of Keynote there, and bringing things behind layered objects and in front of layered objects. But it's just about being a little bit creative with the resources that you've got available to you and the space that you have available to you. So I don't know, Jan, is Keynote something you ever use in presentations?
I use Keynote every single time I'm facilitating virtually. When I'm in person, I try to go almost tech-free if I can do it, and use more like flip chart and paper and things like that. But for virtual presentations, I use Keynote a lot. Also for my for YouTube videos that I create, which I actually try to record as live as possible, Keynote is usually my tool of choice to just quickly show some information next to me.
Well, I think one of the things this also teaches us, actually, or forces you in one way, is to follow some of the guidelines for doing slides and putting together shows in Keynote, and that is to not to put too much text on the screen and to make it clear, and to have only a few bullet points, if any, and keep it simple. So I noticed keep it simple was a theme from earlier on when we asked people what they do. But this almost forces you to do that by having a smaller screen and a limited space in a square. It's never going to work for some types of presentation, because in some cases you're obviously going to have big, complicated network infrastructure diagrams or marketing details and sales forecasts and stuff like that. It just won't work. You're not getting that information. Got a good friend called Brian, who's a lawyer in Canada. His presentations are almost purely 100% text. They're terrible. And he knows they're terrible, but that's what lawyers do. They put lots of text on the screen, and he's trying to get that to be better, but at the moment failing miserably, I'm afraid. So, but you know, he's trying.
I just had a quick question. I know we got Doug in the house who's just joined us as well. So thanks for joining us, Doug. We'll bring him on as a guest in a second. I was just going to ask you, Jan, how important is it to have you as a presence in virtual meetings when you're presenting your material? Because we mentioned earlier, or at the top of the call, when we were talking about when you screen share in Zoom, the presentation typically goes full screen and you're a little person down at the bottom here, and all you can see is just, like you can see now, very small gestures and so on. So how important is it to have you more sort of in a third of the screen so people can actually see you? Because you are the presenter at the end of the day. The presentation deck and the text that you're seeing on screen is really just to reinforce the message, to guide the message, not necessarily to be the whole thing. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how important it is for you to be on the screen and why people seem to forget that, specifically when they're running the Zoom presentations. And Microsoft Teams is even worse, just as you know.
Yeah, I mean, the way we connect with each other is by seeing people's facial reactions and seeing, like, getting a connect, uh, replicating what we would see in person, right? I think just the fact that we're already in this virtual space where we can't really connect with each other as much because it's this two-dimensional space. And then at the same time, most people, they don't necessarily look right at the camera, right? They look down to their screen and the camera's up here, so we don't even get that eye contact anymore. And that's why I think the more we can see the person, the more we're able to connect with them. And to me, when I design my workshops or live sessions, I switch between scenes all the time. If I'm talking, I'm full screen. If I have information, that comes in. If that's not relevant anymore, that goes out. If there's a lot of information, then I become like a circle in the corner and the information gets kind of the spotlight. But I try to also switch it up as much as I can because that also keeps people engaged. If it's the same thing people are looking at, they're going to slowly start tuning out. And I think that's the reason why it's not great for participants, but I also get why a lot of presenters do this because like clicking the share button and finding your presentation and all of that, for some people it's just a lot. It's very easily overwhelming. So if they only have to do that once, like do all my share slides, good, I'm done. Now I can focus on actually delivering my content. I don't have to worry about all of the tech anymore. Then they just leave the slide deck up until the end. And if one of my pet peeves is if a slide just says Q&A or thank you, but it's still up at the end of the presentation. Like there's no other slide that is coming after, and it's still up, and we're doing a Q&A, and people ask questions, and all we see is like the little video feeds of people on the side. Yeah, to me, whatever is the most important thing in that moment, that should be in the focus, and the more we can make that easier by switching back and forth. Like in Zoom, it's harder to do. That's why I think also you are doing this with Ecamm Live and other tools and Keynote. So you can just be a little bit more flexible with that.
Yeah, it doesn't lend itself to be an immersive experience if you're just using Zoom. And both Martin and I, coming from the corporate world, they have a tendency to just do that. Share my presentation, 30 slides later, very wordy, and now we're done. And that's it. You know, and it's not, it doesn't lend itself to be interactive, immersive, or even keeping people occupied. And I love the way you talk about just switching back and forth, because this pattern interrupt, the stimulation that it gives to the people that are watching, jolts them back into focus. And I think that's a great way of making sure that people are kept entertained and informed at the same time.
Yeah, like I used to work in video production for over 10 years, and I've shot and edited a lot of videos too. And there's always this fear of a client wants a talking head video, which is just them talking to the camera with nothing else there, which I think is the other extreme, right? No slides, no visuals to support what they're saying. Mm-hmm. But both that and just the slides and not seeing the person are the two extremes that ideally will be able to kind of meet somewhere in the middle, where it just gets entertaining, because whatever you're saying, if you can have a visual that supports it, people see it and they hear you say it, it'll stick, it'll be more memorable for them.
Absolutely.
I think that's absolutely right. So I'm going to switch scenes now. So people who are in the Zoom room, Johan and Doug, just make sure we're going to go into an active speaker scene. So as soon as you cough or say anything, you're going to be jumping into the scene. So you may want to move yourself or mute yourself if you don't want to talk, but we'll be inviting you to talk as well. So just bear that in mind. Keep your fingers near the mute button to stop you coughing and jumping onto the scene.
Both guests are really terrified now. I can just see they're both like going, oh, we're not going to touch anything. Please, we're not going to say anything.
So I know we've got a couple of guests in. Got Johan in, and we've got Doug in as well. And whoever speaks will jump into this bubble. Doug looks like he's on his mobile phone. I'm guessing he's normally in a wonderful studio, but thank you for joining us anyway. So Doug might look a bit big when he comes onto the screen. But first of all, Johan's been patiently waiting in the background. So I'd love you to unmute and come in and say hi and let us know what you saw, what you thought of what you've seen so far.
Hi guys, really glad to be here. I think I just get inspired and it resonates a lot with me what John is saying, like about how we need to engage people when we sit in these situations and in these settings. And I've been on too many webinars where people are just sitting on a small side, and it's like we need to see eyes, we need to interconnect. And in this space, when we're sitting in this virtual world, we need to see eyes. We need to be able to connect to each other. And so it's better to make that possibility bigger and larger. And we don't get that by sitting in a small little square on the side of a presentation. That's not what's engaging me, at least. So I totally agree with John, what he's saying.
For people that don't know you, Johan, if you would mind just introducing yourself and just telling people what you do.
So I work with remote learnings, so remote learning session, remote facilitation, and that's basically what I've been doing for 6 years. I happened to stumble into it by a client asking me to do a remote learning session. I said, no, I will never ever do anything remote. I like to do things physical. But then but if, and then I needed to start to sort of envision something else. And then I started to buy my tech stuff, so my green screen and play with that. And then the gamers, they became my idols. And then with that, I sort of started to evolve it. And so nowadays, I'm mostly working with remote learning sessions and creating learning environments for people. But if I choose, I would choose remote, because that's basically, it's so fun. And I think it's actually also pretty easy to impress people what you can do there in that space, because they're so used to sitting in these team meetings and Zoom meetings, and they set that as the standard. And if you twist that a bit, people go, oh, so this is actually remote. So that's my passion.
Great.
And I think
you've got an amazing setup. Looks really good. Sorry,
I was going to say, I think you're a bit of an OBS guy, aren't you? As opposed to Ecamm.
Yeah, I am. It's cheaper. No, but actually, it was my old Mac's fault. It sort of died on me, and then I needed to choose. So then I left my Mac, and then I went to the other side, and now I'm here. So I'm an OBS guy nowadays. Otherwise, I would probably try Ecamm. I was like, it looks interesting.
Yeah, one day. I think we should we should bring Douglas on board, being as he's sitting in the back. And I know that Douglas works with groups of people, and therefore maybe this is something that might be useful to Douglas. So Douglas, if you'd like to unmute yourself and come on, and I will mute myself.
Fantastic. Hi guys, how are you doing? Wow, I am big. Let's see if I can move it back. I'm extremely big. Oh my God. How can I reduce?
Maybe if you turn your phone into the landscape mode, it'll flip, and it might be a bit better for you. Try that.
I want landscape. Now, is that better? No?
We need you to go back into the... Oh, have you frozen?
Have I frozen?
Let's go back.
See what's happened. I'm still there.
Back. Let's try that.
Right. So if I go to it's horizontal now. Is that better? Oh, yes, it is. Okay. I get you. We can learn. This is good. Let's see how we can do it. Let's see. Is that better? I'm trying to line it up. That better? Yes. That's kind of like all right. Do you concur, guys? Okay, great stuff. Because I'm on the one that is going to be speaking. Yeah, no, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Hi, everybody there. You guys all look fantastic. I thought, let me jump on this virtual call, and just see what it looks like via mobile. It does work. It just, the vertical orientation doesn't really work at the moment in terms of finding out how you center yourself on the screen. But all the sentiments I think are true. I like the format, particularly if you're pitching a book, selling something. I think it's very important that we just need to consider being slightly above our competitors, particularly now when jobs are at stake with AI and all of that kind of stuff. If you can demonstrate some sort of element of creativity, some sort of way of better engaging your audience, you will stand out from the crowd just enough for you to demonstrate more value. I emphasize this everywhere I go. I'm sick and tired of Zoom calls going the traditional route. It's tiring, boring, disengaging. I too, when I use Ecamm, I put my scenes in to a randomized scene, when they're timed on the scenes. So after maybe 3, then 4, then 10 seconds, the scene will change just so it adds a bit of variety to what I'm doing. It does make it a bit more complicated in running the show or the presentation I'm doing, but at least keeping concentration, keeping the audience engaged and entertained at the same time is crucial for what I do in my business in terms of transformation. You can see their eyes glaze, they've got that vacant look and stare. So anything you could do to jolt people's attention. I think also very quickly, as we start to mature and in our experimentation with these formats, you're going to get a lot more customization, a lot more individualization taking place. So you can show up with your best version of yourself. Not before, it was just you wearing a suit and tie or regalia that reflects your professionalism. I think now, since COVID and people are working from home a lot more, they need to up their game when it comes to how they show up to the world in terms of their lighting, sound, presentation that best reflects their own personality. So during COVID, I spent a lot of time doing research on backgrounds, looking at celebrities or interviews and try and read what books do they have in the background. See, and the way they set up their rooms so that I could offer that as an additional service to some of my clients to say, look, if now you're professional, you need to be thinking about your background setting and all that kind of stuff. So no, I'm very interested in that book you got there. Yeah, I'll be the one of the first ones to read that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks
amazing.
for your time.
Thanks for your insights.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, yeah, and Douglas is normally in a very fancy room, and so thank you for opening the world to your phone this evening rather than all of our fancy rooms. That's very good of you, but thanks for popping on there. What I just wanted to do was just ask a couple of questions of Jan, really, in terms of this vertical format. Do you think it's going to fly? Could you see yourself facilitating things in this vertical format? Because vertical's not going away. It's not going anywhere. Whether it happens on LinkedIn is another thing entirely. But could you see yourself hosting events in this format?
I think we have to figure out where our audiences are, right? Like if our audiences are all on their phones and that's how they're consuming the content, then we have to be there too. That's the tricky thing. So we will have to just figure out how to make it work, because right now it just feels very unusual. Like I was sharing this earlier with you on this call. Right now I'm looking at a teleprompter, and instead of seeing everyone on this call nice and big, I just have like this very slim video feed of what you're actually sending out. And it's harder for me to connect with people that way. Like I love having the full gallery view full of people and being able to see them and feed off them and feed off that energy. So I know if I was doing something vertical, I probably would have to figure out some workaround for myself to do that. And maybe it is setting up my teleprompter in a vertical mode. I'm maybe having my camera being vertical, because if all of those things on the side usually either get cut off or I have to be so small to fit it in, then I also would rearrange kind of the things behind me. I would add my campfire, move it a little bit more this way, more to the middle. So everything's just a little bit more compact. And yeah, I think then I'm willing to experiment with it. Like I'm experimenting with just recording short vertical videos already. But the other thing, and I saw a comment right at the beginning that we have to keep in mind, depending on what platform it goes out, there's all kinds of buttons on the side and like titles on the top, and the captions are somewhere at the bottom, right? There's all of these other things that we need to keep in mind. And yeah, that just needs some figuring out. So I'm glad that both of you are starting up this series of experiments.
I think just to your point, Jan, it is interesting that there is no standardization right now across the platforms with regards to the vertical format and where everything is placed. So what we've tried to do in this, or what Martin specifically has tried to do, is have a happy medium between where everything is placed if you're looking at it from YouTube Shorts versus where it looks when we push it out to LinkedIn and others. And I was just looking on my phone then whilst I was listening to you, just because Daryl mentioned Video Like a Dad, that we seem to be a little bit too high in this. And it's weird because we've tested this before and most of the time it seems to be okay, but there are these overlays, and depending on what application you're using, you could tap on the phone and most of those would go away. But you do see at the bottom third of this view right now, if you're looking at it on YouTube, that there is a ton of comments coming in, and they're persistent. They don't disappear like we're doing here on Ecamm. So they may not be able to see the visualized comments that Martin's bringing in because we've got these overlays. So you're right, there is a lot of experimentation that needs to be done, I think, with vertical. But as Martin said, vertical's not going away. And I think if people can adapt, maybe it's just another way of saying we just need another studio, another gear setup just for vertical only, right? And as you mentioned at the top of the call, a great idea, turn your camera into that vertical format to get more real estate, top and bottom. And depending on what kind of camera that you have, it might lend itself to giving you more visual space in the frame, so you can put more things in there to keep people entertained. So I love the fact that we're trying to do this, and I love the fact that people are engaged in it. And as Martin said, vertical isn't going anywhere. And I think the more that we can sort of push the boundaries and experiment, maybe there is a platform that people can potentially use using OBS, using Ecamm, because you simply can't do this natively in Zoom or Teams, as we know. It's just going to be, one view and no visuals or anything like that. So great tools like Ecamm and OBS can certainly push the boundaries in how we visualize and present the material in the vertical format. And I'm interested to see how this goes. This is the whole point of the show, and bringing great people on like yourselves can help guide and shape how this works in the future and maybe bring some ideas. So, and speaking of experts and wonderful people, we have Saeed in the room. Hello, Saeed, and thank you for joining.
Everybody, sorry I'm very, very late, but I made it. That's all that counts. Hey, Jan.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, we get to take a quick screenshot when Saeed's appeared then, and then end the show. So it's interesting, the comments about where everything goes. What I've noticed, your phone even makes a difference. So the bezel on your phone will cover some of the outside edge, and you may notice there's a little strip above us all here, and that's totally intentional, and that's because the bezel on my iPhone, where the cameras are, it's sort of a lozenge shape above Neil's head, suddenly appears when you watch it on playback. So it's not apparent that that's going to happen right now, but I know that when I play it back, there will be a missing lump in the top of the screen. So I've found out that we have to drop everybody down a little bit from the top of the screen, or you lose that. LinkedIn is the most generous in terms of not walking over everything. So it does put closed captions by default in the bottom of the screen, but maybe only the bottom inch or so of the screen, whereas YouTube and some of the other platforms put it all over the place. And the other comment, in fact, I think Saeed made this comment the other week there, was if you're watching on the phone, of course, if you want to interact and type comments in, your keyboard's going to come halfway up the screen while you're typing in your comments. So just need to bear these things in mind, but largely it means that the area below us all at the moment, we can drop in comments, but occasionally they might be covered up by a keyboard or something else. But most of the time, this area where all the squares are is perfectly fine and won't be covered up by little icons because you can, certainly in YouTube, you can make them all disappear and make it look nice. So yeah, there is a bit of thought that goes on behind it all. But, I will let somebody else jump in now while I mute and grab something to drink.
Well, I was going to say that I didn't recognise Saeed at first without his hat. So, Saeed, what's the deal without the hat today? I mean, is it a new look?
No, once a year I cut my hair, or let my get my hair cut. So yeah, I thought I would show off on camera. So what's the point of having fresh hair and then covering it with the hat? That would be like a hat on a head, literally. So
Very good. Well, thanks for sharing your
only
brand
for
new
you.
haircut
I
with
knew
us.
I will be on camera today, so best behavior.
And I like Doug's point about repurposing and making sure that his shelving is looking on point with regards to his literature that he has. Because, you know, if I was back at my mum's place, there'd be a row of Mills and Boon's romance novels to feast your eyes on. So maybe that's not something that would be, well, professional and you'd want to have in your shot. Well, maybe Johan's going, well, maybe, you know, each to their own. But that's a different channel altogether. But I think it's important now that what we see when we come on camera and when we're here, when we turn up, it really is our new digital resume, our experience, how we look on camera, how we portray ourselves, how we converse, how we articulate our messages is all now our digital resume. It's our CV. It's how we are. And people see us on camera and say, well, that guy's professional. I like his setup. And I think, and I was looking at some YouTube videos only the other day, that it seems to be less and less forgiving for people that don't have reasonable sound, or at least a reasonable camera. I think it's unforgivable now in this day and age, with everything being so reasonably inexpensive, that you should have decent quality sound is your first priority, especially when you're presenting. Cameras and visuals and so on, in terms of that quality, I think it's very important. But if you don't have decent audio to start with, I think that's pretty much unforgivable. So that's audio first, camera second, visuals last. But I'd be happy to take comments and thoughts on what people think about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to head towards ending the show, actually, because we've gone past an hour already. So I just want to say thank you to Johan and Doug and Saeed for joining us live on camera. We're going to let you zoom off now, no pun intended. And thank you for all the other people who have been watching us live on the channel. I'm seeing a lot of comments coming in and a lot of people watching. So that's great, but I'm going to magically move on to almost a closing scene. And we'll just have another quick chat with Jan before we close. So that's been great, and we have got a QR code, and that links to where anybody watching can go register for Jan's book in advance, or at least register their interest in his book on the website. So that's where you can find it. You know, we know you've all been waiting to get to this point in the presentation in general, I'm sure. But any final thoughts before we disappear, Jan, on the whole presenting and ice melters? Give us a final tip.
Actually, the one question that came up for me, as you just mentioned, we've been live for an hour, is also like, are people usually watching much shorter content on our phones, right? So if we're thinking of creating presentations, does that also mean that they have to be much shorter? Like, do people have the attention span to hold their phone for an hour watching something? Will their hand get tired? And also, and this has been the biggest challenge that I had when the pandemic started, can people be present with you? Because it's so easy to be distracted. There's other notifications that are going to pop up on your phone. And in person, I always would invite people to turn off their phones, because it's this obstacle between us connecting with each other. Like once that buzzes, our attention is away from the person that we're talking to. So when we do this virtually, we have to be very conscious and intentional about how we want to set up the space so people are not multitasking. And I could see that that might actually be a big challenge with everybody being on their phone already having it in their hand. Like, what do you do if there's a notification from a social media app that pops up? Are you gonna check it out, which like even I am tempted to do, or can we make sure people are still there with us? So don't have the answer. I just know that this might be one thing that we have to be thinking about to ensure that we're not just having blank videos, like people who are not really listening, not really there tuning in, but people are ready to engage with our content.
That is an excellent point, I think.
Yeah, it is. So I think,
and we have to consider the people that are consuming this type of format as well, where people are just scrolling, right? And it's got to be attention grabbing, and typically these types of videos are very short. So it is definitely something to think about. So yeah, it is an excellent point. And I guess only time will tell whether this format will work in a live environment, or whether the type of material that's presented in these formats that we're doing right now is shorter, is more bursty, is quick, and then that might capture people's attention for the time that we want it to be. But I guess only time will tell. But thanks for that excellent point.
Yeah, and I guess you've proven your own point, because I've been watching the little number which tells me how many people are watching going up and down and up and down and up and down, which is clearly people's attention span. They've come on, they've had a look, okay, go off and do something else, then I'll come back, and then I'll come. So yeah, I think that's something we need to consider. How long does the show need to be? And maybe it needs to be shorter. We don't know, but we have a tendency to always run on anyway. So we're going to say hang around in the green room for a second while we go to a close, Jan, and then do a 1-minute outro as well. But thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having a quick chat in the green room afterwards.
Nice, and
thanks,
thank
Jan.
you for it. Yeah.
So next, the next show that we've got going on this week is on Thursday, and that is in the far more relaxed and easy format of widescreen, and our special guest is going to be Catherine Wakefield. And Catherine is a bit of a Ecamm nerd and a computer nerd, and teaches adults how to build websites. So we're looking forward to just basically a relaxed hour-long chat with Karen on Thursday, where I don't have to press millions and millions of buttons. That's all going to be Neil's challenge, and the QR code to register for that event is at the bottom of the screen right now. So Neil, would you like to make some closing comments?
Well, I just want to first of all thank Jan and all the guests that have kindly joined us in this vertical format today. It is going to be interesting to see how this pans out over the next few months, and whether it gets adopted 100% and wholeheartedly by LinkedIn, but we'll see. But really looking forward to meeting up with Catherine on Thursday, and as Martin said, it's an easy show for him. He just has to turn up like I've done today, instead of messing around with all these buttons and things to do under the hood. And there's a lot to do in these shows, as Martin well knows. So thanks to you, Martin, for putting all this wonderful overlay and setup together. It's remarkable how you managed to pull these looks off in this vertical format. I know you've probably spent many hours doing it, so it's really appreciated. And looking forward to catching up with you and Catherine on the Thursday Tech Talk Thursday show at 5 p.m. UK, 12 noon Eastern.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Cheerio from Edinburgh.
And bye from Portugal.